Mandalorian Season 3 has received a lot of criticism, from a 50% Rotten Tomatoes audience score to fan videos lamenting the season to articles from mainstream publications saying that Mando has lost its way. Some of this criticism is fair, but some is unfair. Although not perfect, there are some fantastic moments to Season 3 that I think are worth talking about. In this video, I cover the positives and negatives of Season 3 as a whole. There are timecodes in the description, so feel free to jump around. Firstly, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Why does this season feel so different from Season 1 and 2? And where are Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni? Season 3 certainly felt different from the previous two seasons. Amongst other factors, perhaps this can be explained with the addition of Rick Famuyiwa joining Dave and Jon as executive producer for the season, as well as directing 3 episodes of Season 3 himself, and the diminishment of Favreau and Filoni's role in the show. In Season 1, Dave Filoni directed 2 episodes, and in Season 2, Favreau directed the first episode, and Filoni directed the Ahsoka episode. However, in Season 3, neither Favreau nor Filoni directed any of the episodes. Filoni is working on his Ahsoka show, and if rumours are true, Favreau has grown frustrated with the higher-ups at Lucasfilm, and now takes less of a fundamental role with the production of The Mandalorian than he did in previous seasons. Rick Famuyiwa directed the Bill Burr episodes in Season 1's The Prisoner and Season 2's The Believer, which was one of the best episodes of The Mandalorian in any of its 3 seasons. These episodes were more comedic and had a slightly different tone to the other episodes in the first 2 seasons, and this tone is certainly carried through to Season 3, with more of a Book of Boba Fett family style. For me, the style wasn't perfect, and was a sign of The Mandalorian becoming Disneyfied to try and appeal to all audiences, young and old. That being said, there were some great jokes, which landed very well this season, such as in Episode 5, when taking on the pirates who had captured Navarro, Din refers back to Season 1, Episode 1.
We have you 4-1.
I like those odds.
And says,
Be careful, my friend. They've got you outnumbered 10-1.
I like those odds.
I bet you do.
And in Episode 6, after minutes of dialogue between Jack Black, Lizzo and Bo-Katan regarding the malfunctioning droids that are causing their planet some issues, Bo-Katan finally looks at Din, who hasn't said a word during these discussions, and Bo asks,
"What do you think?"
And Din replies.
You had me at battle droids.
Then after a villainous monologue from Christopher Lloyd, Bo-Katan stuns him and says this.
Politics.
Even the funniest line isn't enough to cover up for some of the story issues with Season 3, and although I like the season, there are some very obvious flaws with the storytelling. This is none more evident than in Episode 2, The Mines of Mandalore. When Din flies to Mandalore and finds out that the planet's air is in fact breathable, you can't help but wonder why didn't the armourer or Bo-Katan go back to Mandalore in all the years since the Empire bombed their home planet, or why they didn't just send a probe droid to test whether the planet had been poisoned. Anyway, Din travels there and is able to walk on a planet's surface by pressurising his helmet. If perhaps Bo-Katan said that many have tried to return to Mandalore, but none have returned, this one line would have filled in that plot hole. Another odd moment in the same episode is when Din gets captured and is attached to a blood-sucking contraption by a Grievous-like cyborg. Grogu escapes the creature's lair, gets back to Din's ship, flies to a different planet, gets Bo-Katan, and when on Mandalore, they walk slowly to where Din is being held captive. Bo saves him before it's too late, and Din wakes up shortly after being rescued, feeling a bit groggy. Whether this took a few hours or a few days, who knows. It was a very convoluted way of saving Din, whilst also being an even more convoluted way of giving Bo the Darksaber. Episode 2 also concluded Din's main objective this season, which was to be redeemed by the living waters of Mandalore. After achieving his primary objective, all following episodes struggle to give Din anything more to do than to support Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan is also aimless until the end of Episode 5, when she is given a quest from the Armourer to retake Mandalore. The season suffers greatly from the lack of active characters driving the plot. Instead, the plot just sort of guides the characters to an end goal, which was to take back Mandalore. In Episode 3, we hit a real divisive moment in the season, and this was a point where many who loved previous seasons just checked out. Episode 3, The Convert, focused on Dr. Pershing, Elia Kane and the New Republic's amnesty program. This episode built up the New Republic's inefficiencies and established Elia Kane as a spy for Moff Gideon. And the episode was certainly something different for The Mandalorian, as up till now every episode was seen through the viewpoint of Din or Grogu. But now suddenly in the 19th episode of the show, we spend 40 minutes with Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane on Coruscant. It was such a drastic switch from what we had come to expect from The Mandalorian. And although Elia Kane features in the penultimate episode, and the New Republic's bureaucratic disorganisation is developed further in later episodes, one wonders whether they could have tied up the separate storylines together a bit better. There's a reason why separate storylines are normally mixed together, intertwining them throughout episodes, as this is how you prevent the choppy storytelling that Season 3 had. I'll focus on the positives of the season soon, but I want to summarise the flaws, to acknowledge that I do see the issues with this season, but despite them, I still liked it. We reached the midway point of the season with episode 4. We rejoin the Mandalorians, after Din and Bo have been welcomed into the clan. And again, the Covert are under attack. Dragon creature captures Paz Vizsla's son, and Din, Paz and the other Mandalorians follow the dragon, until their jetpacks run out of fuel. They crash land, and Paz Vizsla tells Din,
He always gets away.
meaning that the dragon has taken Mandalorians before. I don't know why they still live in this giant alligator and dragon-infested beach cave, or why they haven't yet to develop a better plan than to follow the creature on jetpacks until their fuel runs out. On top of this, Bo-Katan flies a gauntlet ship, following the dragon, and then for some reason returns back to the Mandalorian base, telling everyone where the dragon is located. Paz and Din join her to reach its nest, and eventually they save young Vizsla, who has been seemingly unaffected whilst inside the creature's belly for at least 2 days. This episode raised so many questions, such as, are Bo and Din the only ones who have a ship out of the entire Mandalorian covert? Why didn't the kid die in the belly of the dragon? And why do the Mandalorians continue to stay in the Australia of the Star Wars galaxy, with giant alligators and dragons attacking them on a regular basis? There are so many odd choices during episode 4 that reflect poorly on the story writing of this season. In episode 5, we see Din and Bo help take back Navarro from Gorian Shard, and despite the entire city consisting of only around 40 citizens, the fight scenes on the ground and in the air were really good. On that point, the ship scenes and fight choreography this season is exciting and much larger in scale compared to season 1 and 2. From Din's timely entrance in episode 1, the dogfight and reveal of Gorian Shard's ship, Din breaking through the clouds to see the desolate Mandalore, Gideon's TIE interceptors and bombers taking on Bo and Din in episode 3, Kelleran Beck and Grogu fleeing from the Jedi Temple, and the fantastic scene of the Corsair looming over Navarro. Then on to episode 6, which like episode 3 was divisive, with celebrity cameos from Jack Black, Lizzo and Christopher Lloyd. Many pointed to these cameos being a symptom of how lost The Mandalorian and Star Wars is. And as history shows us, Ed Sheeran singing in Game of Thrones, when shows introduce celebrities, it's always an ominous sign of the series losing its overall story by putting distracting cameos ahead of a solid script. Saying this, I thought that Jack Black and Lizzo fitted in well with the wealth and opulence of the planet Plazir 15, but they are distracting, and parts of the episode did feel a bit like a Saturday Night Live sketch. My main problem with this episode was that except from the first and last few minutes, it was a contained filler episode, which in itself is fine, but for episode 6 out of 8, we still didn't really know the aim of this season, and who the primary antagonist was. It felt like time was running out for season 3, and a side quest episode would have been better placed earlier on and not in the final third of the season. Next was the penultimate episode, Chapter 23, The Spies. This and the final episode, Chapter 24, The Return, play as one long episode. It had really good action and another beautiful ship scene with the Mandalorian fleet heading to Mandalore. It finally put in place the overarching narrative and introduces the Imperial Shadow Council, and made the taking of Mandalore a tangible challenge, made all the more impactful with the death of Paz Vizsla at the hands of the 3 Praetorian Guards. Episode 8, the finale, gets off to an odd start, with Grogu rescuing Din from 2 Beskar troopers, and although Din is again being saved, he at least frees himself and takes out one of the guards unarmed. How Grogu manages to get to Din is anyone's guess, as the blast doors were shut at the end of episode 7, leaving no way for Grogu to enter Gideon's base. Leaving that aside, shortly after Din is freed, we see Moff Gideon track Din and Grogu on his holomap. For some reason, Gideon tells his guards to leave the pair, and he will deal with them himself. And by deal with them himself, what he actually means is he will let them kill his Beskar troopers, destroy his clone tanks, and then eventually confront Din with his helmet off, giving an expositional, villainous monologue. Yet again, this is a perfect example of lazy writing that has plagued this season. And worse than that, it was completely unnecessary. Had they just not added the scene where Moff Gideon sees Grogu and Din on a holomap, we would have assumed that they sneaked their way around the base, unbeknown to Gideon. But as that short 10-second scene was in the episode, we now question why Gideon left Din to trawl through his base. He had troopers, the Praetorians, and the controls to the base. He could have easily stopped Din and Grogu before they reached him. Aside from Moff Gideon's stupidity, the rest of the episode contained fantastic action scenes, with Grogu and Mando taking on the Praetorians, Bo-Katan fighting Moff Gideon, and Axe Woves being the MVP of the episode, crashing a light cruiser into Gideon's base. Episode 8 sums up Season 3 as a whole. Stunning visuals and good choreography, but a lazy script full of questionable character decisions. Now that's the plot of the season summarised. And now I want to point to some of the best aspects and some of the worst aspects of Season 3. I would say that large parts of this season were aimless, and one of the main reasons for this was because of the on-screen and off-screen events that took place between the end of Season 2 and the start of Season 3. At the end of Season 2, Grogu joins Luke to train as a Jedi, and Mando will seemingly be returning to his old bounty hunting life. And we leave Din, Bo-Katan, Koska Reeves, Cara Dune and Fennec on Gideon's light cruiser. Then at the start of Season 3, Grogu and Din are back together in Din's new ship. Cara Dune is no longer the Marshal of Navarro. Bo-Katan has lost Koska Reeves and the rest of her Mandalorian force, and Din is kicked out of his clan for taking off his helmet. All of these changes took place in the Book of Boba Fett or off-screen. Some of this is explained in Episode 1 when the Armourer retells Din that he is an apostate and must bathe in the mines of Mandalore to redeem himself. Then Din explains to Greef Karga what happened during the events of the Book of Boba Fett and why Grogu has returned.
I completed my quest. He returned to me, and now I'm an apostate.
Now if you haven't watched the Book of Boba Fett, Din's recap to Greef Karga is pretty much all you get as to why the characters have changed so much from Season 1 to Season 2. The return of Grogu completely undermined the ending of Season 2. What would have been better for both characters, and from a linear narrative perspective, would have been to keep Grogu and Din apart for a period of Season 3. Grogu could perhaps be trained with Luke in Episode 3 and 4, let's say, and then we could see how Din and Grogu are missing each other. Grogu, feeling that Din is in trouble, is drawn to save Din, just how Luke left Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back to help his friends. There would have been an epic reuniting of the pair, which would carry an emotional weight that the season lacked. Many rumours have speculated that bringing Grogu back in a Book of Boba Fett was a corporate decision made above Favreau's head. This would explain why Season 3 felt like a quick rewrite, which didn't know what to do with Grogu for the first half of the season. I thought in the second half of the season, Grogu's development was actually really good. He is stronger with the Force, uses, or maybe overuses, his new jumping ability. And whilst controlling IG-11, he made choices, such as stopping the Axe Woves and pacifist fight,
No.
and rescuing Din. He escaped the mines of Mandalore, brought Bo-Katan to Din, and is now beginning to speak, albeit in gobbledygook, but he is certainly more understandable, and is clearly understanding what Din and other characters are saying to him. Grogu is now using his Force powers in the open, and Din is treating Grogu as more of a partner than a kid who he has to keep hidden. This culminates with Din and Grogu fighting together to defeat the Praetorian Guards. Yes, there are still inconsistencies with Grogu. One minute he's force pushing enemies like a Jedi Padawan, and then the next minute he's jumping into Lizzo's arms, eating snacks like a toddler. After Episode 1, I made a video titled The Grogu Problem, where I laid out the case that Grogu's development, or lack of, would hinder Din's storyline, and the show as a whole. However, in the last few episodes of Season 3, I think they developed the young green foundling really well. Compare what happened when he stopped a single flamethrower in Season 1 to how Grogu can now stop a massive explosion without falling asleep. And although reverting back to his base function of eating food whenever he can, Grogu is now Din's apprentice, and is less of a helpless baby that needs to be left on the ship. Bo is also a character who has solid development. From Episode 2 onwards, Bo takes over as a point of view character for the season. She learns from her mistakes in the past as leader of Mandalore, and from the grumpy sulking princess in Episode 1, we now see her in Episode 8 as a uniting figure for all of Mandalore. Katie Sackhoff delivered the best performance by far this season, and her relationship with Din was really interesting, with the two having a sometimes frosty but often collaborative and potentially romantic relationship. She also acted as a mother figure to Grogu, and it was nice to see the little family unit of Father Din, Mother Bo, and Grogu as their child, even though Grogu is probably older than both of them. Unfortunately, Bo's development does come at the expense of Din. In episode 2, Din really struggles against the Free Alamites and gets saved 2 times by Bo. Firstly from the scavenging cyborg, and then at the end of the episode when he falls down the chasm of the Mandalorian mine. This theme of Din having to be saved continues throughout the season, with Grogu and Bo both saving him in a finale as well. Visually, we see this changing of the lead character from Din to Bo, with Grogu sitting with or alongside Bo-Katan on her ship, while Din is relegated to the back of the ship on death duty. Din does have a few good moments in the finale. The standout moment is when he takes out numerous Beskar stormtroopers using knives, shields, and finally blasters. I think an unfair criticism for the season was, inverted commas, the weak cameos. Season 2 of The Mandalorian was criticised for its overuse of legacy characters, making cameo appearances, such as Bo-Katan, Ahsoka, Boba Fett, and Luke Skywalker. These cameos undoubtedly stirred excitement for Star Wars fans and created a massive buzz around the series as a whole. In Season 3, the cameo characters were R5 from A New Hope, Karen Beck as a Jedi who rescued Grogu from the Jedi Temple, Zeb from Star Wars Rebels, and Captain Pelion from the Timothy Zahn 4 novels. Although it's good not to solely rely on cameos, Season 2 created an excitement and expectation that there would be more exciting characters to come in Season 3. Just look at the YouTube theories behind who rescued Grogu from the Jedi Temple. Could it be Mace Windu, or Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi Librarian Lady, or even Palpatine? And although a beautiful return for Ahmed Best, the actor that portrayed Jar Jar Binks, and received a lot of unfair criticism for doing so, it was not the amazing reveal of a well-known character that many had expected. If say Mace Windu featured in a flashback, or Han Solo teamed up with Din for one episode, I believe that would have kept many Star Wars fans excited during a meandering middle section of the season. But it would have been a little cheap and tacked on. So I applaud the decision to not have cameo characters from the original or prequel films. A positive and negative in Season 3 was that it spent a lot of time world building, similar to how the prequels did to establish the Star Wars galaxy at large. I feel that this was at the cost of a clear storyline, but some of the world building in this season will pay off in future seasons and shows. The Purgle Whales and Shadow Council will definitely be expanded on in the Ahsoka series coming later this year. The New Republic's inefficiencies were made all too obvious this season. In Episode 3, with their rather foolish amnesty program, and in Episode 6, with the planet Plazir 15 not being allowed to form a military, subject to the New Republic's demilitarization charter. This somewhat lessens the success of the Rebels from the original trilogy, whilst also attempting to fill in a gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, as to why the New Republic was so easily bested by the First Order. We are introduced to the Shadow Council, who, as the name suggests, work behind the scenes continuing the Empire's operations in secret. This gives us a greater understanding of how the remnant Imperials gathered resources and are still operating throughout the Outer Rim and in pockets across the galaxy. We are also seeing vast improvements in Navarro, with the best example of this being Greef Karga with his shiny new clothes and cape-carrying droids. One last positive before I cover the ending of Season 3 is that the amount of massive grand-scale battles and ship fights this season. They are truly brilliant. Seeing the Mandalorian fleet fly over Navarro is visually pleasing, and is just so Star Wars. Moving away from the western style of Season 1 and 2 has its obvious problems, but the grand fight and ship scenes are something that Season 3 has really knocked out of the park. Now if we look at the ending for the season, the final 10 minutes of Episode 8 I thoroughly enjoyed, and although we all know it won't be the end of The Mandalorian, because Disney will always milk the Grogu cash cow, I would have been happy with this episode concluding the series as a whole. Mandalore is back, thanks to Din, the Armourer and Bo-Katan. The Night Owls and Children of the Watch are reunited, and Bo has grown to re-establish Mandalore as a pivotal planet in the future of the galaxy. The Darksaber, a representation of the failed past of Mandalore, its warring factions and self-destructive power, is destroyed. showing that Mandalore is free to carve a new future without replicating the mistakes of the past. Next, there's Moff Gideon, who has been the main antagonist for 3 seasons now, and 3 times he has been bested by Din and his various allies. Giancarlo Esposito is a brilliant actor, but the character of Moff Gideon has been rather one-note. Perhaps in the finale, only his clone was killed, and the original Moff Gideon escaped, but I hope not. With the introduction of the Shadow Council, perhaps we'll see a new big bad with more nuance in Season 4 and beyond. Grogu's formal adoption as Din's son, thus becoming Din Grogu, which yes is a rubbish name, and opens up the question as to whether Din Djarin's first name is actually Djarin, and Bo-Katan's first name, is it Kryze or Katan? But leaving that aside, although at first I thought Din officially becoming Grogu's dad was a bit pointless, as this has been the unspoken case since episode 3 of season 1. But now I see that official adoption in a slightly different light. For those who were adopted by step-parents, from what I am told, it's an incredibly important moment, and the ending shot of the episode is lovely. With Din, feet up, looking at his son, finally free of having to run and fight. It was a really happy and wholesome moment. We rarely get to see happy endings in Star Wars. The victory at the end of Return of the Jedi was made redundant by The Force Awakens. The Revenge of the Sith ending with Order 66, and a Clone Wars animated show ending with Captain Rex and Ahsoka having to kill their former clone brothers. It was nice for once to have an ending where the main characters win and have a peaceful life, albeit probably for a short time. Yes, Season 3 was a step down from previous seasons, and sadly for many who hoped that somehow The Mandalorian would step aside or even retcon a sequel trilogy, with Commodore Hux, General Hux's father, the Praetorian Guards, and Project Necromancer, aka somehow Palpatine returned. We can expect more tie-ins with the sequel trilogy as the series goes on. But deviating to the sequel trilogy, at least there is a plan for The Mandalorian, with Jon Favreau already having finished writing Season 4, and at least a creative team of primarily Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are clearly lifetime fans of Star Wars. Listen to any interview from Favreau, and you can see his love for the fans and his humility, that he is honoured to work within the Star Wars galaxy.
I don't know what would make me not enjoy doing it, especially as long as the audience is connecting with these characters. This feels like a really enjoyable moment.
And Dave Filoni, who worked alongside George Lucas for years, has a clear understanding of Lucas's vision for Star Wars, and has an encyclopedic knowledge of the franchise. I can't think of a better pair to deliver future Star Wars shows. With a lot of rumours around the difficulties of Season 3, and Favreau's frustration with corporate oversight from Kathleen Kennedy, COVID disruption affecting production, and potential issues with the lead actor Pedro Pascal, I believe there are enough caveats to explain away some of the issues with Season 3. And after the almost reset ending, back with Din and Grogu, who are going to be working as Republic contractors, perhaps there is hope for better things to come in Season 4. Anyway, what do you think? Was Season 3 really that bad? Or am I being blinded by my love of Season 1 and 2 in my defence of the season? Let me know in the comments below. It's early days for the channel, so liking, commenting and subscribing is really appreciated, as it helps the channel to grow. So for more reviews and video essays like this one, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you, and see you again.